We talk about culture so much, and we all know how important it is to our success. But what exactly is culture? I mean, that seems like such an obvious question, and yet it could be pretty squishy and hard to define. And if we can't pin down exactly what it is, it's going to be pretty hard to work on it in a more systematic way. Our goal for this video is to bring a lot more clarity to that question. Let me offer you a simple definition of culture that I use in the second edition of my book, Culture by Design. See, I say that culture is the set of principles that governs how people behave in a given context. Let me say that one more time. Culture is the set of principles that governs how people behave in a given context. So let's unpack that a little bit. There are two parts to this definition. The first and the most important is the idea that culture is about behavior. While our behavior is certainly influenced, no question, by our values and our beliefs, the culture is revealed through behavior. I may or may not know what people's values and beliefs are, but I can see what they do or how they behave. And at the end of the day, that's all that really matters. By the way, if you've defined a set of core values, you might be wondering, well, what's the difference between that and a behavior? I have a whole nother video that goes into that question in depth, but let me just say here that a value is typically an abstract concept, whereas a behavior is an action. And because it's an action, it's usually much clearer to teach and easier to understand. The second part of this definition is the notion that context matters. Recently, I was listening to Malcolm Gladwell's classic book, The Tipping Point, and he's got a whole section in there on the power of context. He cites study after study that shows how people behave differently in different situations. Now, that's not to suggest that people aren't authentic, but rather that the situation we're in and the group of people we're around significantly influences how we behave. What's considered permissible or expected behavior is different when you're at work or with your family or with your high school friends or your softball team or maybe at church. Each of those groups has a different culture or a different set of norms for behavior. So why is this behavioral definition so important? Well, believe it or not, I think the single biggest reason that most leaders don't know what to do about culture is the very definition of culture. In fact, when I ask leaders, what is culture? I get some pretty fuzzy answers. They'll say, well, it's kind of the way things happen around here, or it's the glue that binds us together, or it's the personality of our company, or it's our environment. And it is all those things, it really is. But what do you do with any of that? Those definitions are like tying my hands behind my back. Okay, so your culture is the personality of your company. Go back to work this afternoon and work on the personality of your company some. What the heck does that mean? But if we make one simple, and I would argue profound paradigm shift, and we begin to see culture as behavior, we open up a whole set of tools to do something about culture. You see, the foundation for everything I teach, which I like to call the power of fundamentals, is nothing more or less than a simple behavior change model. People have been studying behavior change literally for thousands of years. Go to the library and there are volumes upon volumes of books all about behavior change. It's not that complicated, and it's definitely not new. As long as we keep talking about culture as some kind of magical pixie dust, or we think of it as pizza parties on Fridays and having a ping pong table in the reception area, then I don't know what to do about any of that. But as soon as we see it as behavior, everything shifts. That's why I make such a big deal about seeing culture through a behavior lens. It's what enables us to roll up our sleeves and actually do something about it. So think about your company's culture for just a moment and consider these questions. What are the behaviors that have become the norm in your organization? How did they become the norm in the first place? Are they the behaviors that you want to be the norm? How could you add more clarity by defining the behaviors that you want to see? How could you teach those behaviors with enough consistency for them to become embedded in your people as the norm for your organization? Now that's building a culture by design instead of by chance.